but there was no way a freighter could be the best at the Black Manta's speed and maneuverability. XO, get the boarding party together and down to the airlock. I'll join you after we've docked, Captain Reed. And Roger, tell everyone going over to be extra careful. They might be smugglers this far away from normal shipping lanes. Baldry nodded. Yes, ma'am. Reed turned to her gunner. Target their engines. Use them initially. I want them to know we mean business. There was a metallic clank from deep in the ship, and the Black Manta rocked. Missile away, Janet reported. Captain Reed watched the chemically propelled weapon close rapidly on the freighter. She was surprised at the lack of any countermeasures by it. The warhead on the missile exploded before impact, sending a shockwave into the back of the big ship. The old freighter's engines dimmed. Helm, take us in. Yes, ma'am. Captain Reed sat in her chair and grabbed the arm's wrist. Roberts, her helmsman, made the landings noisy and hard to frighten the occupants of the ship they were raiding. She watched the freighter fill the view screen. There was a jolt and a series of loud clangs as the Black Manta's landing gear slammed onto the hull of the freighter and gripped it magnetically. There was a second loud thump. Lock and seal, Roberts said. Reed stood. Good. Mr. Roberts, you have the bridge. Janet, you're with me. Captain Reed smiled as she rode the lift down to the lower decks. This was exactly what she needed to take her mind off her troubles. 2 minutes later, she was standing among a dozen members of her crew, her pistol drawn, preparing to board the freighter. Open it, Reed commanded. A pair of members stepped forward. Jeffers, a young blond man carrying an electronic device, and Tilly, a brown-haired woman nearly as old as the captain, holding a large wrench. The young crewman placed his piece of equipment near the joint airlock, started punching buttons. After a minute, the lights on the device and the airlock control both turned green. Ready, Captain. Reed looked at Tilly and nodded. The woman jammed the wrench through the airlock turning wheel and with a grunt gave it a tug. There was the hiss of air, and she withdrew the winch and spun the airlock mechanism. The hatch opened. The smell of stale air and food well past its prime filled their noses, and no one was shooting at them. This came as a pleasant surprise to Captain Reed. Go, Reed shouted. Janet Zabrinsky charged into the vessel, screaming at the top of her lungs. Behind her, a dozen of the crew followed, each brandishing their weapons and yelling a battle cry. Baldry snorted and stepped through the airlock into the freighter. Janet likes doing that entirely too much. Reed laughed. All the youngsters do. No sound of gunfire. Maybe this will go off clean after all. One can hope. So what do we have on the chief's wish list this time? Reed asked. Baldry pulled the pad from his pocket of his flight suit. He poked it a couple of times, shook it, slapped its side. The pad whined and gurgled and made a noise like a hissing cat. Induction couplers and coils, targeting sensors, circuit board of any kind, soldering wire, copper tubing, fresh water, yeast. Reed smiled at the last. So that's what he plans to do with all that wheat grain he's hiding in the access tubes. It's supposed to be a secret. Baldry paused. Smiggin will brew up something that won't kill the crew or make them go blind, unlike some other idiots on board. The captain's reply was cut off by screaming ahead of them. Drawing her pistol, she set off at a jog toward the voices. She turned the corner and pounded down a middle staircase toward a narrow corridor as the young blonde technician started up. Report, she barked. Captain, there's, well, I think you'd best see for yourself, ma'am. What is it, Jeffers? Children. The captain looked up at the sound of her gunnery officer's voice. Janet stepped around the corner and into the corridor. A brown-haired girl, no more than 10, clutching Janet's hand as if it were a lifeline. The girl's face was flushed from crying, and she stood slightly behind Janet, barefoot and shivering in her faded floral dress. There's nothing on this ship but children, Janet said. Captain Reed holstered her weapon. She squatted down and looked at the little girl and smiled. Can you tell me where all the grown-ups are? The Tanari took them. Jeffers snorted. There's no such thing as Tanari. The Shadow Stalkers are a bedtime story. Spacers and colonists tell their children to scare them in line. Kathleen Reed stood and drew her pistol in one motion. No, she whispered. The Tanari are real. She made eye contact with Baldry, who swallowed, sweat breaking out on his head. If the girl was telling the truth, they were well and truly screwed. They had met the Tanari, Reed and Baldry, and done battle with them in the one encounter between the two species decades ago. They knew the myth for the ugly reality. In those days, the Black Manta was just the Manta, a fast attack interceptor of the Colonial Defense Forces, protecting the far-flung outer colonies. Lieutenant Commander Baldry was the ship's chief navigator and second officer, Reed a senior lieutenant. By the time they escaped the colony planet of Iago II, with the children left behind after the Tanari raid, half the landing party was lost to the shadowy, lightning-quick creatures, and the Manta, her captain killed in action, fled the sector at best speed, their hold filled with frightened, orphaned children. It was the last time humans and Tenari had interacted for 30 years, until this raid. How many kids on the ship? Reed asked. About 50. When they came, the adults loaded us on the ship and we ran, but they found us, the girl whispered in a tiny voice. Captain, Baldry asked, round the children up, transfer them to the Manta, we get them safe, and we run. Keep the crew in teams of 3 or, ma'am, a voice crackled and hissed under her ear. We have incoming ships, 2 minutes to intercept. I don't know where they came from, Captain. They must have been running silent. Unseal the airlock and undock, she shouted into her comm-link. Her ship was helpless attached to the hull of the freighter. Ma'am, Roberts' voice crackled. That is an order, Mr. Roberts. Undock and send a distress call. There was gunfire, the sound like ripping cloth, and a man's short scream echoed down the corridors. The lights on the freighter flickered and died as the wail of terrified children filled the air. The comlink in her ear went silent. Baldry and Janet produced emergency lights from their belts, filling the corridor with flickering, washed-out illumination. Captain Reed gripped her weapon tighter and licked her lips. Her crew had gathered round her, a gaggle of dirty and underfed children mixed in the lot. All right, Baldry and Jeffers, come with me to the bridge. Janet, take the children, round them up, get them to engineering. Barricade yourself in and try to get this tub working. She turned to the woman at her side. Tilly, you're the closest thing to an engineer we have in this party. I'm counting on you to get this ship moving. We need power and propulsion, and we need it yesterday. Janet took a deep breath and turned to the rest of the crew. You heard the captain. Form up a circle around the young'uns. Stay sharp. Who's got lights? Get them out. Move, people. With a sloppy salute to Reed, Sabrinsky took point of her whole party, and the mess just moved out. Reed watched them for a moment before turning to the 2 men with her. Let's go. Captain, what's the plan? Jeffers asked. Draw the enemy off. Try to gain control of the ship at the bridge, Baldry answered. He looked at the younger man. Are you ready for some up-close action? Jeffers nodded his head yes, his face pale in Baldry's emergency light. They moved around a gentle curve in the corridor and found the first casualty. Baldry frowned. Levy, God help him. No one can help him now, Reed said. We trust the speed and don't worry about noise. We want to draw him away from Janet and the children. Baldry nodded. I'll take lead. Reed gave him the go-ahead, and the older man set out down the dim-lit corridor, Reed in the middle of the formation, Jeffers bringing up the rear. How far to the bridge? Reed gasped out between breaths. She was not familiar with many of the older ships still in service. Should be about another 20 yards or so, then up 2 levels. Shouldn't. Drop, Reed yelled, raising her pistol. Baldry dived toward the deck and twisted, bringing his own weapon into play. It shimmered from the darkness, a long, sinuous shadow, 6-limbed, the barest hint of a wedge-shaped head on a long neck. Reed fired wildly at the thing moving along the ceiling. The pistol roared and echoed in the enclosed space. Bullets rang off the steel walls. Jeffers ducked as Reed fired over his head, and as quickly as the creature appeared, it was gone. And so was Jeffers. Kathleen Reed stared into the darkness that seemed to have consumed her man. Just like that, silent as the grave, one of her crew was no more. Jeffers? He's gone, Baldry said, grabbing her arm. We have to get to the bridge. Captain, Baldry barked in his best parade ground voice when she failed to move. Reed jerked her arm out of Baldry's grip, pushed the fresh magazine into her pistol. Lead on, Mr. Baldry.
So Mike took part of the gripping space opera pirate section of the book. So the rest of it, I got a mix of historical and fantasy stories. So there's a couple of empty seats up here if you want to sit. We can shift around a little bit. There's also pieces of aid if anyone needs any sustenance to get through. It can make the rounds. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit from 3 of the other stories, which are all quite different. I think that is a safe thing to say. So this is the beginning of a story called Treasured Island. It's by a writer named Jen Hale, who lives out in Bellingham, Washington. And I should say that while I got submissions from 14 different countries, I accepted authors from 8 different countries. So kind of like a fun bit of trivia about this book. How I came to be marooned on the back of a wandering island is a matter of some debate. Bosun Lisboa would no doubt maintain that I received a rightful punishment for attempting to incite a mutiny against our brawny, blonde Captain Alvin. but I would argue that I simply surveyed the ragged, barefoot crew as to how many members might enjoy a respite from murdering sailors and plundering great stores of half-rotten bananas. I'd wondered if anyone else desired to return to familiar home shores, perhaps take up fishing as a source of income. After the months we'd spent chasing fruitless rumors of Captain Baradas' hidden treasure and slaughtering entire crews of little merchant vessels for their pitiful stores, fishing didn't sound so bad to many. Before you laugh, allow me to point out that a good number of us came from fishing families before being pressed by naval recruiters or captured by privateers. All I know of navigation and sailing, I learned while hunting the vast silver shoals of sunskates and dragon eels that swam in the shadows of Reinazona's wandering islands. It wasn't the easiest of work or the safest of trades, but then neither is piracy. And truth be told, I'd felt far cleaner back when I reeked of fish guts and eel shit. So after another evening, swabbing blood off the deck and listening to the screams coming from the sad little captive in our captain's cabin, I thought the change of occupation might be worth pondering. In hindsight, I acknowledge that I shouldn't have pondered so very loudly, but I'd been under the influence of rum and remorse, and then a little more rum after that. I may have referred to Lisboa as toad spunk. I may have called the captain a turd in a velvet coat. That's beside the point. The trouble was that Captain Alvin had only just done in our previous captain, Easel was his name, I think, who had been leading us a week since he himself had done away with the captain before him. There had been a few before that as well. Sometimes even I forgot it had been Captain Baradas, him of the maps and riddles and lost treasure, who'd had me dragged from my little fishing boat to serve as their Almagua navigator. In the service of our queen, he assured me. But the wandering islands he expected me to find a way through were strangers to me, nothing like those I'd grown up among. And of course it hadn't taken long before Baradas' patriotic privateering gave way to preying upon any ships he encountered amidst the ever-changing shores of the La Cuerva Ocean. All in all, it made for an uneasy history. And there was me, in the middle of it, sick and drunk. I still argue that I didn't deserve to stand beneath the mizzenmast, accused of inciting mutiny, though I readily admit to having upped my stew on the captain's shoes. Of course, the crew couldn't just murder me and toss my body in the ocean. Deadly bad luck killing an Almagua at sea, even one as defiled with bloodshed as me. Too much of a chance that my fishy spirit would take to the waves howling murder and raise up those black whales on my granny's side of the family. I swore to them that I'd do it too. They will rise up and crack the ship in half. I punched my right hand in the air, displaying the blue tattoo of my clan. And they will drag each and every man of you down to a cold, deep hell where my ghost will play mermaid melodies on your bones. Bosun Lisboa looked alarmed, though he tried to hide his fear by bowing his face into his thick black beard. Captain Alvin still held his pistol to my head, but I felt his hand tremble. It's a doomed captain who curses himself and his whole crew. I pitched my voice, not to reach him, but the fearful men surrounding us. If I didn't spark a mutiny in life, I certainly meant to with my death. It was the very least I could do for the man threatening to blow my brains out. Alvin lowered his pistol. An hour later, the captain and bosun decided to let me set course for the nearest wandering island. Then they'd throw me overboard so I could swim to the shore. If I got tangled in the island's stinging tentacles, well, that would be between me and the island, none of their doing. That was Bosun Lisboa's reasoning, and many agreed with him. The evening I was to be tossed over, the red-haired eunuchs, Aqua and Rui, brought me a canteen of fresh water and a strip of dried squid. They'd been the only survivors of an Imperial Indaji pleasure ship that we sank 3 years ago, and neither one wanted to make an enemy of a ghost. They requested that I tell my grandmother of their kindness, and I agreed. After that, Delir, who was long-limbed, dark-haired, and only a few years older than me, crouched beside me. A decade past, he'd fled gambling debts in the opal kingdom of Mupadas, only to lose his liberty at a card table at some pirate nest on the La Cuerva coast. Now he traded me his prized knife in exchange for a kiss and my lucky dice. I realized there were tears in his eyes, and I suppose those nights sharing hammocks and handjobs must have meant something more to him than he'd ever said. I gave him my last gold coins, telling him that they would only weigh me down in the waves. Then I went to the dark water and swam beneath a full yellow moon. Back home, I thought our flotillas of islands drifting across straits and forming ephemeral archipelagos were immense, but the wandering islands of the La Puerla Ocean made them seem as small as man-of-war jellyfish. Tendrils thick as tree trunks and scarlet fan-like gills hung around me and stretched all the way into the lightless steppes. What creatures they hunted down there I couldn't say. I simply thanked the great brine that none of the silver-stinging tendrils cared for so much as small pretentious me. Even in the dark, I could see brilliant curls ringing the wandering island like a reef. I nicked my hands and shins, making my way to the sandy beach. I would have laid down there and slept, I was so tired, but the big spider crabs clambering ashore all around me inspired me with enough worry to keep from flopping there like easy carrion beneath their fist-sized claws. I staggered to a stand of fig trees and managed to climb up to a branch, which I lashed myself to with my belt and dozed. I'll stop there and I'll slow down some more. No, there's more. No worries. Tasting menu, like I said.
I'm a big guy.
There's a seat up front if you want. There's a large couch over there. And there is a large couch.
There's a large couch.
Is there refreshments?
There are. Pieces of 8.
And there's soda pop in back.
Oops.
So I'm in the back?
Yep. Might even be cookies. Okay. All right.
Are you going to start a different one?
Yeah. This is the taste testing menu.
Try before you buy it.
Yeah. Yes, you get a little bit of everything. Check it out.
No, so you have to try it out.
Tell you read.
Of the whole thing.
Okay, I'm going to read a little bit of one of the other stories I got, and this was by a writer named Ed Grabianowski. Ed lives in exotic Buffalo, New York, where he is in a heavy metal band called Doom Lord. And the amazing thing about this is after I accepted the various writers for this anthology, I found out I had not one but 2 heavy metal musicians, one from Buffalo, one from England. The one in England runs a Judge Dredd conference and plays drums, and so she and Ed have been bonding all over the place on Twitter. It's kind of hilarious. Hey man, did you see my kit? Yeah, look at this. So that was kind of just a cool, weird byproduct of doing this. So,
How long did it take you to put them all together?
I've been working on this book for about 5 months now. So, and part of that was, time spent on the call and then edits and getting things back and forth to writers. And,
So not a years-long project.
well, no, but I publish things myself, so that tends to cut down on the bureaucracy. But, design elements and so forth, I mean, really, you have to get a book like this, especially if you want it in print, a couple of months before you actually want to release it. It has to be in some sort of solid form to get it out through all the various sales channels. So that's 5 months of my time, not 5 months of actual production time before this came out. So, okay, so the doomed amulet of Aram Val is Ed's story in this. Captain Jaga crouched by the quarterdeck rail. Beside her, the steady rattle of lead shot striking the ship, the side of the ship rang in her ears. Hard to port! Put on speed, Tripton! The sailing master, his demeanor that of an aggravated professor, was scrambling on all fours above a hatch on the ground, the gun deck. Hard to port! He yelled down into the opening, then turned back to Jaga. We can't do both at the same time, Below, the helmsman heard Tripton's call and pushed hard on the whipstaff, cranking the rudder far beneath him and shunting the ship to port. The hammer of trail groaned and came about. The chatter of gunfire and other projectiles against the hull let up for a moment, and Jaga dared to look over the rail. To starboard was the lush jungle shore of Brathi. Just aft were the low-slung golden gunboats of the Red Hands, mercenaries hired to protect the coastal trade routes. The same trade Jaga intended to take a piece of for herself. She flashed a manic smile at Tripton. Do what you can, sir. Tripton looked toward the fore of the ship, one last futile spray of lead peppering the rail to his right. The carefully sculpted goatee and wire spectacles riding low on his nose gave him a delicate look, but his skin was weathered and brown, and his gentle, precise voice changed to a sailor's rough bark when he relayed orders to the captain. Oi, lads, straighten out and away from the shore, full sail. Gotta get off these breakers. The crew, no longer ducking rifle fire, moved about the rigging and set the Hammer of Triel on her new course. Jaga watched the gunboats give up the chase and fade into the distance. She'd lost this engagement by coming in too far from shore. Her foremast bark easy to spot against the horizon. The red hands had been ready for her. Jaga wasn't overly fond of a fair fight. Tripton, she called mildly. A word, please. He joined her on the quarterdeck, and they watched the coast recede behind and to starboard, the sleek ship gaining speed as it got farther from shore, slicing along the ocean with swells rather than crashing through breaking waves. They were headed south, the wind at their back, the sky clear and blue, though the air was thick with humidity. Jaga eyed Tripton's heavy leather coat. How can you bear the heat in that thing? I don't think I've ever seen you take it off. He turned slightly and brushed away some lead shot that was embedded in the folds and creases of the coat, not quite resisting the urge to grin. Jaga laughed. My aim is to go another day south and try our luck again, she said. I consider this a trial run. Now that we know the merchants hire mercenaries and they have guns, not very good guns, but those red-hand gunboats are too small and fast for us to hit with our cannons. Tripton shrugged. Well, it seems we have much choice. We can't very well return north, not with an impressively large amount of gold to bribe our way past your many admirers. Jaga knew her reputation. They called her Jaga the Ripper, or Jaga the Bitter, or Jaga the Thorn of Gale. In the darker corners of Ulsh and Covengate, they had much fouler names for her, filthy epithets that made her smile when she heard them. She'd spent the last year flying the jade flag of the Azoth Rebellion on the Hammer of Triel's mast, patrolling the coast of Ulsh for any shipping between Ulshan loyalists and the exiled royal family. The Azothans paid her well, but when the king of Ulsh came roaring into Jade Bay with a full war fleet, she slipped away and headed south. She'd backed a rebellion. The rebellion had been crushed, and now it was Jaga who was in exile. The Ulshans knew the Hammer of Triel well. Its low hull painted gloss black, Jaga at the helm, unmistakable, pale and tall, black hair cropped at ear length like an afterthought, tattoos winding up her arms and up her neck. Going back meant braving either the Ulshan Navy or the knife-sharp ice floes of the far upper sea. The wind blows south. We go south, she said, and hope it's a wind of good fortune. Tripton snorted. I'll stop that one. And in case anyone's wondering, I'm selecting based on what sounded okay for me to read with a cold.
Isn't that everything with pirate tales?
Well, there was a range of stuff where people used language I wasn't that familiar with, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be stumbling all over this, and I do that tonight. We'll wait till I'm healthy. Try that again. Okay, so this story came in from a writer in Taiwan, and it was far enough out there that I really had to think about whether or not I was going to take it. Not because it isn't very good, but because it's filled with a whole bunch of really snarky New York jokes. So it's set in New York after the climate apocalypse. The streets are all flooded. There's a brisk pirate trade. Only the rich actually live on dry land. And it's just kind of brilliant in its own way. So it's called After the Deluge, and it's by Peter Golubach. Shouldn't we hoist the black flag? Asked the first mate. They'd been shadowing the merchantmen for more than an hour in the East Channel, edging closer by drips and drabs, acting the part of a lowly water taxi ferrying tired servants from the island back to the main as the day came to a close. The captain adjusted her eye patch. Not quite yet, I think, she said. She didn't speak loudly, but then she didn't have to. The crew hung on her every word. Now she reached in her pocket for a stale crust of bread, offering it to the pigeon perched on her shoulder. It regarded the morsel for a moment and cooed appreciatively, then snatched the crust from the captain's hand. "What do you think, Blombito?" said the captain to her bird. "Is it time?" It wasn't an easy question to answer, and Blombito the pigeon would have been well advised to think before responding. Hoisting the Jolly Roger too soon would give the Murchie time to run and sound the alarm, but every second they waited was another opportunity for a sharp pair of eyes aboard that fat Murchie to sweep over the seemingly innocent water taxi a few points windward and see the concealed gun ports, then to turn tail and run, screaming for help from the Navy as they fled. The captain's reverie was interrupted by the second mate's arrival on the quarterdeck. "Avast, Captain," he said, doffing a battered ball cap by way of greeting. "Avast and ahoy, Roberto," replied the skipper. "What's the word?" "The boys and girls are eager, Captain," he said, tugging one of the plates on his matted black beard for emphasis. "It's been, what, near 3 weeks now since we caught that pleasure yacht in the Central Lagoon? What's the latest on the fuel situation?" It was this problem more than any other that had gnawed at the captain this past hour as they crept up on their unwitting quarry. "Clemenza says we have 10 minutes at top speed." The captain produced a spyglass from one of the innumerable pockets that adorned her battered blue peacoat, putting it to her remaining eye. It was dusk, and the wind was starting to pick up a bit from the southeast. The garbage-choked waters of the East Channel slapped the ship's hull. The air smelled like mud and seagull shit. It was time. She turned to the first mate, who had been silent since being rebuffed not 5 minutes ago. Was it really just 5 minutes ago, thought the captain? It feels like a year. "Beat to quarters and hoist the black flag, Aki. It's time to start slitting throats." The first mate smiled, which would have been kind of cute were her teeth not filed in points. "About time, Captain," she said, and she swept down the stairs from the quarterdeck. "Battle stations! Look hardy, you scurvy dogs!" she screamed to roars from the crew. Not to be outdone, the second mate had been pulling down the yellow, white, and black tricolor of the Water Taxi and Limousine Commission. The ship had burst into life and was now a swarm of activity as the pirates ran out the guns and the Jolly Roger crawled its way to the top of the flagpole. From another pocket of the captain's coat came an antique red and white megaphone, which she thumbed on and directed at her prey. "Ahoy there, Murchie!" she yelled at the ungainly slate-gray ship. More a bathtub than a boat, she thought with a sneer. That was now only a couple of 100 yards off her starboard bow. She lifted the megaphone to her lips again. "This is the Pizza Rat," she said. And her crew pounded the gunwales with the butts of their guns and shrieked, "You've heard of us and what we've done. Now heave to and prepare to be boarded, or we'll have your guts for garters." A few months ago, after a merchantman had refused to strike the colors, leading the Pizza Rat into a lengthy chase and then resisting the boarding party tooth and nail to boot, Aki had actually tried to turn the offending captain's guts into garters. It hadn't worked out very well. And indeed, it was days like that which made the captain wonder if she hadn't gotten herself into the wrong line of work. She banished that stray thought from her mind as she grabbed the fire pole that went down from the quarterdeck to the bridge and shimmied down. Unlike the quarterdeck, the bridge was enclosed from the elements by a set of spectacularly grimy floor-to-ceiling windows. It was empty except for Fuad, the helmsman, a perpetually rumpled middle-aged man with curling gray hair and a walrus mustache. Fuad's grandfather had driven taxis on land. His father had driven them on water. "Driving is in the blood," is what Fuad himself said whenever he'd had one too many and was feeling thoughtful. He turned and sketched a mock salute as the captain arrived on the bridge. "Ready for action, Fuad?" He snorted, sending the ends of his mustache skyward for a moment. "Action? What action?" He motioned at the Murchie. He caught them with their pants down and their ass hanging out. There were a few other ships in hailing distance, and each and every one of them bugged out the instant the Jolly Roger made its appearance. That left only the Pizza Rat's prize, floundering pathetically in the water dead ahead. The captain didn't even need her spyglass now. She was close enough to see the tub's name, the O'Melvany, whatever that was, and its crew scurrying around like ants whose colony had just been smashed by a vengeful giant. "They put about on the port tack when we raised the black flag," said Fuad. "Then changed the damn minds and went hard to starboard. Now they're caught up in the stays and not a motor to be seen." It was just then that the O'Melvany struck the colors. The captain smirked. "We didn't even need to fire a warning shot," she said. "Oh well, suppose it's about time everything went right for once." Fuad frowned. "Look over there, Captain," he said, pointing starboard and astern. "One of the other ships is turning around." This did indeed call for the spyglass, which made an encore appearance. The captain frowned into the lens. One ship had turned around and was headed directly towards the Pizza Rat and the Murchie. It was going fast, too. A sleek little blue number with some contraption mounted on the bow. The captain put down her spyglass, turned to Fuad, and said, "I don't know what in hell's they think they're playing." She would have said "at" next, but there was a loud explosion. Blombitos squawked. flew directly into the ceiling and landed in a heap of feathers on the tiller. A massive gout of water shot through the air, uncomfortably close to the starboard beam. "It's NYPN!" shouted Fuad, pointing to the advancing blue ship. "Disengage, and do it now," said the captain, fighting to keep a note of hysteria from creeping into her voice. "Set a course for LaGuardia Bay and fire up the motor. Full speed ahead, Fuad." I'll stop All right, anybody got any questions, statements, need more chocolate? Just for you all, I brought the inflatable parrot tonight. Apparently it doesn't retain its air very well.
I like that the captain had a pigeon suitable for New York. Easy to come by.
Did you find themes developing as you were reading the submissions?
Oh, God. Well, there was a point at which I looked at my pile of yeses and maybes and went, this just isn't gonna like be quite what I was expecting. I had thought that it was going to be, you know, a bit more traditional pirates, but yeah. So the point at which I accepted A.J. Fitzwater's piece, which features a capybara pirate.
And they get really silent for a moment.
Can you repeat that? Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a point at which I decided once I was taking the capybara pirate, all bets were off.
Okay.
So like Ed's piece has a lot of sort of Howard-esque qualities to it, and it was the best Howard-esque piece I got because there were multiples. And there were several other things where I got, you know, things that were similar, but one was a little stronger than the others. I can honestly say that the one I just read is the most unique story in the book. Blombito, which is the name of the pigeon, is the nickname for the previous mayor of New York. So when Blomberg was attempting to speak Spanish, somebody opened a Twitter account, which is called something like Blombito Speaks to You, and it was entirely in Spanglish because he didn't apparently speak Spanish. And so it's this running joke throughout the whole thing. The pizza wrap thing, I think a lot of people caught. There's a couple of other things in there that are just kind of classic. But yeah, so it's themes. Well, they're all about pirates. We got to that. And after that, all bets were off.
Were some of them written to spec then, or they were all just kind of pirate stories floating in the wild?
They were by and large pirate stories that people wrote up and sent in. This is my third anthology. It's my first one for Queen of Swords. My third anthology overall. And for previous ones, what we did, I co-edited one of them, was we actually had people send in proposals ahead of time. This time, I didn't bother with that because I figured pirates, if it's good enough, if I don't like it, it'll sell somewhere else. I also said I would look at reprints, which is how Mike's story got in. So most of them were written to spec. The Capybara pirate story is actually a sequel to another Capybara pirate story that's in Beneath Ceaseless Skies. For the most part, everything came in on the open call. I did a couple of invites, and that was about it. And I think maybe like half the authors I actually sent invites to wrote something, and then everything else came in open call. So I think I know 3 of the 15 authors that are in this anthology. Otherwise, everybody else was kind of like.
Is a capybara a bird or what?
Capybaras are a kind of rodent. Big rodent.
Rodent of unusual size.
It's a rodent of unusual size. Sort of like, you ever read any Ursula Vernon? If not, you really should.
There's an Ursula Vernon fan.
So, yeah, okay. So Ursula Vernon has, amongst many anthropomorphic animal characters, a wombat called Digger, who shows up as the protagonist in this fabulous series that she wrote. And Sinrak reminds me a little bit of Digger. So it's that kind, it's an Ursula Vernon-esque furry story, basically. And the point at which I figured I'd open the door to the furries, that was it.
All bets were on.
Yeah, once you've done that,
Now we have chips land where they may.
that's right.
Well, that's my question, really. Like, so pirates, like, there's humans mostly, obviously, in the stories you read. What, and then the pirate, the boarding story, the tropes of pirates as they built it, there was a lot of that. What was the most, in your submissions, whether it made the book or not, what was the thing that made you say, I never thought of pirates like that? The most.
Probably Peter's story. That was the one I didn't expect. Somebody did send in a story about software pirates, which I thought was a noble effort to try something different, but by that point everything had gone very heavily toward the more traditional sorts of pirates, in a very broad sense of traditional. So that one just didn't really fit in tone. But yeah, that was probably the most unexpected of the stories that I got. But yeah, so there's a couple of science fiction stories. The story that I cannot do justice to tonight because my voice isn't going to hold out for it is a writer up in Canada did this fabulous piece about Andromache, who's Hector's widow, after the fall of Troy, turning pirate. And if you've seen any of the reviews for this is the one that keeps coming up in review after review, and people are like, and that one is one of my favorites, but I would want to be in full voice to really give it justice. Obviously, I like all of them; they wouldn't be in here. But we've got Viking pirates, we've got Barbary corsairs, we've got pirates in outer space, we've got dimensional pirates, we have capybara pirates, who are utterly charming. I really like that story a lot too.
So were there any things that kept coming up in the submissions that made you go, nope, nope, nope? I assume that they were all probably pirates.
Mostly, I mean, there were one or two that were just like really hyper-violent for reasons that the story did not support. And there was the one that I rejected that came in all caps, which made some reference to an editor locked in the basement. I still don't know what that was about. Yeah, I know.
Just
about
you
pirates.
actually got that?
Yeah, I did actually. It was, I think the cover letter was in all caps, and it included a list of every single place this person had been published, and then there was something about the editor who lived downstairs and some other stuff that didn't make a lot of sense. And it was interesting.
Slush piles are weird.
Those were really weird. But, I will say that out of 100, some odd submissions, that was the only one I got that made me go. Which is pretty good. Everybody was pretty professional, and, hell, people even ran spell check. It was awesome. Like, good job, people, even if I don't take your story. I'm so proud of you. Nothing showed up in crayon. Of course, the advantage of taking e-submissions, they can't do things in crayon anymore. So
I miss them submissions, crayon on Twitter.
a number of years ago, yes.
So practical stuff. How much is it? Do we pay you or do we pay at the front desk?
It's on sale, so I'm knocking $1 off. It's $15, and you pay at the front desk, but we'll sign them here if you like. So, I like the way you think, Rich.
And everything else in this story you can get from the front desk.
That too.
And will they have it here?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Greg's been carrying most of the books that are putting out, so for which we are very grateful. Buy things from Greg.
One thing, the staff here knows where things are.
Yes.
They do indeed. And Greg is very supportive of the community, and the staff are lovely people, and they have us here month after month after month.
Yeah.
Because at this point, I don't know how many years I've been coming here to do readings. It's been a long time.
I've been doing DreamHaven readings. My first one was in 2005, the old location. Each year, every other year, it seems like.
So In March, I'll be back here to talk about, I did a lessons learned, the first year of running my own small press. So it's lessons learned about small press publishing. And I'm gonna do a recap in March, which will be year 2 in all the adventures. So, you should come to that, it's kind of entertaining. Michael's been through the other Michael.
Was the first lessons learned recorded?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's on the YouTube.
It's on the YouTube, it's also, Queen of Swords Press has its own YouTube channel, so it's on the playlist too. Thanks to Conrad.
Conrad!
Eventually.
Everybody wave at Conrad. So,